All right, we are live. So thanks everyone for joining. This is Sales Fever, a press part of our virtual Revenue Excellence Summit. I'm Neil McLean. I'll be the moderator here today with this fantastic panel that we have on board. And today we'll be talking about how we've seen a bunch of folks here in this panel take what was initially a vision, maybe something written on a napkin in their living room, into a real solution that's being used by thousands of users in the market. So we'll share some stories, some anecdotes, some wins and losses along the way, and excited to dive in. For context, I'm Neil. I work on a company called Novatic. We help teams create interactive product demos. And most commonly, interactive demos are used by sales teams and marketing teams as a way to share the product throughout the sales cycle. So for us, most commonly, this is a post-demo leave behind, but it's really used end-to-end throughout the sales process. I'll pass it on to Christian, who's next, to give a quick intro and go from there.
Hey Neil, excited to be here. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of UserGems. UserGems, we turn buyer job changes and relationship intelligence into revenue. So the idea is if you have a champion, this person changes their job. On the one hand, you have a churn risk. On the other hand, you have a sales opportunity. We help you automate the full process and also surface the rest of the buying committee. All right, passing on to Joyce.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks, Neil. Hi, everyone. I'm Joyce. I'm the CEO and founder of Alaris Global. We help American sales and marketing professionals get remote jobs with foreign companies entering the US. And I have been on this founder journey for a while. Previously, I actually helped build go-to-market teams on behalf of American companies abroad, and now reversing the playbook, and excited to be here. I'll hand off the mic to Matt.
Thank you. Great to be here. Matt Millen, co-founder of Regi.ai. We're the leading AI co-pilot for modern sales teams, streamlining prospecting while improving engagement using AI. I'm excited to be here today because I started selling in 1987. That's before corporate email and the internet. So I started off with a desk phone and a fax machine. I've seen a lot of technology come into the sales tech stack, and you start to see some of the problems it solves and some of the problems it creates. And I'm really excited about the conversation. Over to Melanie.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Hey, everyone. I'm Melanie Floy, co-founder and CEO here at Speckit. Simply put, Speckit is a just-in-time enablement solution. And the whole idea is that we put your sales enablement, so think your prospecting playbooks, your sales process, your stage guidance, your battle cards, and more directly inside of the tools that your reps work out of every day, so that they can really focus on building pipeline and driving revenue and your customers, and not be distracted looking for answers across your company. So super excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Melanie. And with that, let's go ahead and dive in. So the first question that I'd pose to the broader panel is around the challenges that you faced. So had this idea, you're starting off, what are the main hurdles that you encountered when starting out from this vision to a real world sales solution? Can start with a quick example on the Novatic end. And I would say that there's two learnings that we primarily had. So one was that just because something is helpful doesn't mean that sellers will use it. The thing that we learned is that a lot of things are nice to have. There's minor inconveniences that sellers always face, but it really has to be a major workflow pain that is solved by your solution in order to actually adopt it. And we've seen that play out time and time again. And it really took a lot of iterations to get to that point. And the second one is that workflow change is hard. That generally speaking, a lot of folks are very used to doing their job the same way it's been done the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So it really has to be that meaningful in order to get adoption from the broader teams. And so what we found to be really helpful along those lines is identifying those sellers that have forward-thinking mindsets. So I think it's really tricky to change the mindset of someone that's been doing this thing the same way for so many years. But for us, for our tool, finding those folks that are open to new workflows and using them as internal champions has been really helpful. But in general, just adopting that workflow change is something that we've noticed to be tricky. But I think a lot of other folks here have great perspectives. Melanie, we'll turn it over to you if you have any learnings from the Speckit side or challenges around us, like turning those into real solutions.
how long do we have? Because
Yeah.
there's over the last few years. I'd say initially going to market was the hardest, really getting clear on like ultimately who's going to be the buyer of our solution, right? Because in the sales tech stack, you've got RevOps, you've got sales enablement, you've got sales leadership. Now you've got like a business systems team. So I think as we were going to market, the landscape of sales budgets were evolving. And, depending on whether you're talking to a small customer versus, let's say, an enterprise, right? In the enterprise, sales enablement, sales operations are still new titles, new terms. And so for us, it was really getting clear on like, where's the budget going to come from? How are you going to get the budget from those individuals that are in the sales cycle? And then who really is going to be responsible for implementing the solution? So what we found early on is like we'd sell to a lot of RevOps teams because they were looking to maximize the value of their tech stack. One of the problems we solve for teams is helping essentially train your sales team on all the different tools in your tech stack by putting your training inside of those tools. But we found that ultimately RevOps, while they feel the pain, aren't the ones creating that training. Enablement is, right? And so in many cases, we had this really great solution, but the training was lacking in it that would actually unlock the impact. And so for us, it really came down to getting clear on who's going to be the person implementing the solution and having to contribute the content to it versus where is the budget going to come from and how do we speak to their pains. So I'd say that was one that is still something that we worked through, but one that was more challenging early on to learn.
I really like that. Yeah, separating the implementation contact and the purchasing contact, and like having a very different pitch for both. I like that. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, lots of challenges. That's the beauty of it. I would say two stick out to me. The first one that sticks out, I'm in the generative AI business. We were doing AI before AI was cool. And then about a year into it, ChatGPT came out. And then, so the competitive landscape has changed dramatically during our product development. And it creates a number of different challenges just in terms of the broader landscape, including products that I used to be very complimentary to, started offering, some level of solutioning. So, you really start taking a look at where do you fit into the tech landscape? How does all of this impact your product strategy and direction, and ensuring that you've got this very clear lane going forward to ensure that you're adding value to your customer and not creating redundant capabilities. So that's a big one for us. The second, I would say, a lesson that I learned early on was this transformation from pitch market fit to product market fit. And what I mean by that is, when I was doing the founder-led selling, for the first year and a half, my pitch would land very well, like the fit, the problem that we solved. But then when you land the product in, different people are using it. There's different workflow considerations, different nuances. A lot of development work had to go into the platform to really adjust to the different workflows that we would be supporting to get closer to product market fit. I don't know how big you have to be to really say you've got product market fit. I've heard some numbers, but we certainly advanced to the pitch market fit. And I think that's a really big lesson for people, especially like the founder-led selling stage, where it's easy to get buy-in from a founder selling into some senior leadership, but really getting that traction and product engagement in the front line where it lands, that's a challenge and something worth thinking through.
Yeah, I think that idea of pitch market fit to product market fit is super interesting. And as a quick follow-up there, Matt, at what point or what signals were you looking for when you made that transition from pitch market fit to product market fit?
Utilization. Like just bottom line utilization. Like, are they using the product to solve the problem that we sold? And we learned a lot. We stayed very close to the user community, a lot of user studies, and it led to a lot of our early product development to make sure that, we think through from the user lens, not just the problem statement.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think for many tools, it sounds great on paper, but until people actually get in and come back weekly, you don't really know if you have something. Joyce, we'd love to hear the Alaris perspective on this as well.
Sure. For For us, I think one of the key challenges is that, we were actually creating a totally new category. And one of the ways that I've described Alaris in the early days, actually before remote work became quite a thing, is we're like reverse outsourcing. We help revenue teams that are based in, let's say, markets like India or China or Israel hire US-based sales and go-to-market teams, as opposed to Americans hiring tech talent, in India, which is what a lot of people are used to. But it felt like we were constantly having to explain what we did. It wasn't succinct. And actually, to this day, I suppose it's not. But depending on who we're talking to, we have a different angle. And so one key learning I had is everyone says they want this. Like if you talk to any founder, any CRO, any head of revenue anywhere in the world, they all agree American salespeople are top world class, quite literally. And they all want to be selling into this market. But the devil's in the details. Everyone agrees they want to do it, but how will they implement it? Will they adopt the tools? Are they going to change their time zones? Are they going to change their behavior? Are they going to be able to, and willing to pay the correct market rates for GTM talent here? So all of those things took a lot of education. And I realized sometimes I almost wish I just sold something that was an iteration upon what someone else had already built, so I could leverage their hard work in GTM and marketing to say, hey, I'm like them, but with this like small added tweak or twist. And instead I had to kind of educate the entire market. But I do think creating a new category in many ways is very meaningful, at least for me, because even though it's a lot of work, a lot of effort to kind of sell into it, we weren't really competing in the same way against others. So the market was relatively just sort of ours to take and ours to mold. So there are always pros and cons. So I think for every challenge, there is a reward. If it weren't challenging, then there's a problem. Like maybe this wasn't a good market to begin with. Why had no other founder done this? Oh, right, because the TAM is tiny or the customers are impossible or whatever it might be. And if it's challenging, and yet not as many people had done it, it's probably because it's challenging. But if you're willing to overcome that challenge, I think as a founder, learning how to sell and how to tell that story, it can be, an extraordinary market to be in.
Go ahead, Madeline. Yeah.
Can I actually add something? Because I love the point you just made. And it's fun because I think there's challenges on two ends. Because you said, hey, I almost wish that I could have gone after, compared it to the solution they were already familiar with to speak to it, because I agree that is also a lot easier. And for us, that actually in the early stages, we used to compare ourselves to what's considered a digital adoption platform, right? So it helps with tool adoption, et cetera. And we were like, hey, we're better than that. We focus more on enablement, et cetera. The challenge, though, is that it depends what kind of reputation those products have in the market, right? For us, those products had often disappointed customers. They were super clunky. They were really low priced. And so for us in the early days, it helped us from a brand awareness standpoint, but then it ended up actually hurting us from a product positioning standpoint. And so I think it just goes to show that there's no perfect go-to-market strategy or playbook, because the same thing that can help you in the early days might end up hurting you in the future, where it's like, well, yes, we're kind of like that, but we're different. I promise we're better, and here's how here's why we're going to solve your problem differently. And it's a beauty and a curse. So just wanted to add that additional perspective too, from what we learned.
I love that too. And on both ends, like if you can get to that point where you do create it, that's great. But maybe it takes like piggybacking off of known entities at first, just to get that initial traction going.
Totally.
It's awesome. Christian, over to you. Curious how you turned that initial vision into what you have today at UserGems.
Yes. And I'll piggyback on what Melanie and Joyce said in a second, but I think there was one unique challenge, especially very different than Matt, who has a whole lot of sales experience. I had zero, like I knew nothing about selling, and I knew nothing about the sales space. And so I think the challenge for us was actually understanding, is what we think is a challenge actually a challenge? And that just meant like a whole lot of conversations, figuring out like, you as a founder, you have this idea and you think like you're really smart and this genius and this is going to be this huge success. And like my marketing professor actually said, like, figure out maybe you're just weird. Maybe you're the only one who thinks this is really a problem. So really the first thing for us was actually really understanding how do different companies structure their sales motion. And then the second piece is what tools are they using in their sales process that might or might not solve what we are doing, right? And I think this is then a little bit piggybacking on what like Melanie and Joyce said, is like, do we position ourselves as like, this is this new and unique thing? Yes, absolutely. But you can assume that the customer or that the prospect immediately makes an association of like, I'm already doing something like this through X. And X could just be, I think the most common competitor is always Excel sheet, I think, when it comes to any software, but they have some kind of solution of how they think they're solving it right now. And even if you do not see it that way, the prospect will. So it's really, really important to understand in the mind of your prospect, what's the competitor? So for us, it was completely understanding what tools and processes are companies using right now. How do we fit in? And then the second big challenge, and obviously once we somehow understood the sales process, is actually starting to sell ourselves, which I started and I didn't have any experience there, but that's another long war story there.
No, that's great, Christian. And I think to the extent that you're able to use a lot of that context to inform like, hey, this is how teams are using, like doing this today. These are the tools they're using and here's the gap. I think that like it was really helpful to paint the picture on exactly where your tool can fit in. And importantly, why it's 5 times, 10 times better than what's being done today. Against that pernicious spreadsheet.
Yes, because your prospect is doing it anyway, whether they tell you that's why they don't buy your product or not. You need to understand what are they comparing you to.
Absolutely. And along those lines of being that differentiated product, I think one thing that's critical as tools develop and as you strengthen your product market fit over time is identifying like, how can you take those feature requests from customers, prioritize them accordingly, and build the most impactful thing. So I think this is a little bit different than that high level strategy that I think and vision that we all have for the product into the tactical. How can we execute on these feature requests and what does that actually look like? As a quick story at Navatic, we have a few different mechanisms for this today. And this has been an iterative process that we feel like we haven't really ever like figured out entirely. I think there's always areas we think we can improve. For us, we have a Slack channel where any sales or customer success person can add in direct feedback from the voice of the customer. So that way when engineering's reading it, it's an actual question that a customer asked versus like the interpretation on the go-to-market side, which I think was helpful. And what we do is we try to tie that to ARR impact and then frequency of requests. So that way, when engineering team is reviewing it, they can see the ARR impact of this feature, the number of times that people want it. And that may be helpful to inform, hey, this is a Q1 or Q2 priority versus something that we need to do immediately right now. So that's the way that we approach it today at Navatic, but love to turn it over to Matt to see how you guys, especially in that developing market, have approached feature development and iteration.
You know, it's a great question, and it's a source of internal conflict at the same time. You know, when Henry Ford was asked like what his customers wanted, you know, they would have said a faster horse because they don't know what's possible. And, you know, we find ourselves pushing the limits of AI, and like customers don't know what it's capable of. And where so much of AI that we know today is around content generation, you know, we're pushing AI into task execution as an example to increase productivity for reps. And so we balance between like our strategic vision first, like carving off that clear path, staying ahead. And our number one like development area is staying true to the North Star and creating moat in some kind of a lane in the market. But we also have to listen to customers. We have to think about renewals. We have to think about new business. So, you know, it's a balance. It's a trade-off. You know, we think about organizing our engineering and product team around this at the same time. But I think at the end of the day, especially as a startup, you know, we've got to run toward the goal. It's what our investors bought into. It's what the early team bought into when they committed. And, you know, we're certainly committed to that future first.
I like that, keeping that end goal in mind. And I'm sure there are things along the way that would be helpful and, you know, are those minor increments, but how can you find that big value add to get to that larger goal? That's great. Joyce, we'd love to hear how it works for you on the Alara side, especially given the fact that it's not just a product. There's also perhaps a a network component to it where you're actively recruiting folks onto the platform?
Yeah, I would say for us, our customers are on both sides because we're a two-sided, I guess from a product perspective, we're a two-sided labor marketplace that can be connected, of course, through AI and through algorithmic matching. But ultimately, and then we also have a bundled payroll and employer of record offering, which is especially important for people in the US to be paid compliantly when their employer might be in a different country, in a different jurisdiction. But ultimately, we need to serve the needs of both sides of the market. And I think it's really important to be very customer centric. We've had like thousands, if not tens of thousands of conversations at this point with various sales leaders around the country. And a couple of key themes stood out. And this is also just knowing sales teams from my time leading and running sales teams in the past. A lot of people just want a job where they feel empowered, where they feel like they're making an impact. But then, they want to be compensated well and fairly. They want to be able to understand that what they're doing is contributing to the company's bottom line. They'll get their commission and that there's opportunity for growth. But then what that means can be a number of things. And what was also interesting is kind of going a step deeper as well to say, okay, this is what a lot of people want, but what is unique about our product offering and what kinds of opportunities we can provide? Well, there's that remote work component, which now with return to office, a company that not only is open to remote work, but necessitates it because it's a global company. Your CRO might actually be in Berlin or in Tel Aviv or in Sydney. So you actually have to be remote because you're the one who's kind of kicking off GTM in North America for them. So there's that component. And then what does empowerment mean? Well, empowerment means that they really trust you. They're not breathing down your neck. They're not there requiring FaceTime because they're, again, literally in another country and you might have team offsites. So those are things where we started to realize things that people said they wanted, but they might have envisioned it a certain way. How can we kind of actualize it and connect what we're offering to that? But then also knowing when you don't want to oversell it. Like there are certain people who say they want flexible remote work environments, but actually they would like a manager who's kind of there with them, who can onboard them, a team that they can work with in office. So the revealed preferences as well of what people actually respond to and how they talk about certain things, even behaviorally, is a really good learning on that side. And on the other side of the market, again, I think a lot of founders who are entering a market for the first time have a lot of unknown unknowns. And it's really, again, not just hearing what they're saying that they want, but revealing their preferences of things like, well, what is their budget? They could say, oh yeah, my budget, my decision is to like build a headcount of like 10 FTEs and have SDRs, AEs, growth marketing, the whole shebang. And then when they really drill down into it, of realizing like, well, what kind of bet are you willing to make? What is the revenue? What's the budget that you can put behind that ambition, that dream, and getting really tactical? Then you realize, sometimes the reality is different from that aspiration. And finally, I think we made the mistake of building a lot of product before we had the volume. And we ended up realizing a lot of our customers actually weren't even using certain product features. And it was almost a waste of putting that much money into product development when we should have just done the unscalable things quickly, because oftentimes they're not actually paying for our product. They're paying for the outcome. And if you could get the same outcome manually at low volume, then you should do that, because it's actually way more expensive to hire engineers than to have kind of an ops person in the interim bridge that tech divide or that tech deficit and get the deliverable that the company wanted during that time frame.
Yeah, no, that's great, Joyce. And I really liked two things that you said. One around revealed preferences. I think that aligns very closely with what Matt said earlier around looking at actual engagement. Because I think what we're seeing, probably everyone on the stage can relate to the fact that a lot of folks say things on calls or they're excited and they mention things offhand. But when it comes down to it, oftentimes there's a disconnect between what actually happens, whether that card's on file, whether they actually expand to that new region. All of that, I think, is subject to the action filter that I think we've all seen play out. So really like that point there. And then secondarily, like around paying for outcomes, just maybe you could follow up on that. How did you specifically work with teams once you realized that outcomes were what people wanted to do that unscalable thing? Like what actually did that look like for you all?
Yeah, sometimes the outcomes. So, as one example, we have we built an ATS and a calendar scheduling tool. The ATS was actually way less important because for a lot of them, they cared so much about the conversations they were having. They didn't need a CRM or ATS to track it. They were actually just manually doing it. Like they were ready to basically have the contacts in their phone to kind of like, directly text them and things like that. So those actions weren't quite as important as like, the calendaring tool, which was really important because when you deal with different time zones, by the time someone submits the time zones to you, you might be asleep. And when you wake up and accept a time, and then they wake up and they're like, oh, sorry, that time was booked. So it's just this constant feedback loop that never ends. So that was actually a tool that was really useful. And I think those are also good bellwethers for whether or not someone is serious, because again, people can kick the tires. They can waste your time having demos with you, like getting kind of, insights into the market and whatnot. But when they really put money down, pay for a subscription and start using your product or start using your services, that's when it's go time. So it was just interesting to be able to kind of balance out those that were starting off and how they were using it versus those that were just using our product to kind of explore.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So actually figuring out like, what is the easiest way to do that? Maybe it's our tool, maybe it's something else. Christian, then Melanie, would love to get your take around how you turn some of these feature requests into innovations.
Yeah. And I think it's a constant battle, I would say, between like the short-term feature requests of a customer saying, hey, I want A or B, and then the long-term vision that you actually have. And especially if they don't go in the same direction. And then you need to wonder, okay, why is that? Is it something that I'm not seeing and it should actually be part of my vision? Or is it that like this is just one request from this one customer that would make them really, really happy, but it wouldn't help me with all the other customers? And I think I'm coming back to something really like there are a whole lot of like cliche advice that is really advice that people give, but actually don't listen to themselves, which is kind of like don't develop like if you ship too, if you're not embarrassed, you ship too late. Like I think this is advice that everyone just says, but nobody actually listened to. But I think the one advice that we constantly repeat, actually two. The first one is like learn to say no. Like the default answer needs to be no. So it shouldn't be that the no is where you get to, but it's actually the yes that you need to get to. And how do you get to that yes, that hey, we're actually developing this? And this is then where I think Neil, what you said, can I associate a dollar value to this? And here's where we learned and continuously learn a really big lesson around, yes, of course, you would like to have this functionality, but like, of course, like I would like to have a much better product, but would you actually pay for it? And we've now started, I think the really good thing and the really bad thing about actually having a ton of customers is that you get a ton of feature requests. And so we said, at least the benefit here is that we can say, if we don't have like at least several that would pay for it, we're not starting developing. And so, which is really a hurdle that you need to take, because it means for a moment you say no, even if it goes into the right direction. But we have certain scenarios right now where we said, hey, this sounds really interesting. I think that could fit our roadmap, but I really want to hear like several customers requesting this and also saying they will pay for it before we then develop in this. And just a reminder, this is easy said and really hard, because I think if you don't constantly remind yourself that this is how it should be done, then you immediately fall back into saying yes to everything. So basically, actually, the number one tip is like write it down next to your computer and where it just says say no.
Yeah, amazing point, Christian. I feel like so many folks want to make their customers happy. It comes from a good spot, but realizing that folks can hijack your roadmap and it can change, like take away years of product progress with some of those decisions to say yes. Melanie, love to get your perspective on this too. Or
and just quick comment on that. I think, learning to say no as a founder is one thing, but how do you train your CSMs, your AEs on how to speak to say no to those things and say like, it's not just, oh, sorry, no, we're not doing this, or no, we're not doing this, or like, yeah, it's on the roadmap at some point, but instead, hey, we're choosing not to do this right now, but here's what we are doing, right? So just thinking about how do you empower the rest of your stakeholders that are going to be interfacing with your customers to do that too. So a couple things, just at the tactical level, what we do, we track feature requests on every opportunity so that we can track like what prospects are asking about. We track it at the account level in Catalyst for customers. We use a tool called Canny, which is where, if a CSM or AE hears requests, you can submit it and then there's upvotes. And so that's basically a tool that our product team can use to kind of like prioritize those requests. And then it's when, from a strategic level, we get the PMs, we get our head of product engineering, myself and others, and we really start looking at, we kind of do quarterly planning, but our roadmap is typically half a year, more or less, that we look out. And we're looking at trade-offs, right? And I think there's healthy tension, right? Do we want to go after new markets or do we want to penetrate our current market more, right? Do we want to focus on growth? Do we want to focus on retention? Do we want to focus on table stakes? Do we want to focus on innovation? Do we want to focus on our end user, right? Or do we want to focus on our admin? Because to your point, we're getting requests from every place. And so we try and take a data-driven approach. One of the things that we learned the very difficult way is the first few years, when you're a small team, you can innovate so quickly, right? And you're in that market grab, you're building, you're throwing a bunch of features at the wall, to echo what Joyce said. And while, Christian, you mentioned, hey, if you're not embarrassed, you probably shipped too late. There's also the point where it's like, oh crap, I shipped a lot of things I'm embarrassed about, and I never went back and made them look great, right? And so you don't want to wake up one day and be like, wow, I've got a lot of features that are fine, but not great. And so it's finding that healthy balance of like, okay, when do you take a step back and make sure that you're really getting clear on the capabilities that are going to be the most important to that long-term success, right? And so for us, we have kind of 3 core principles about how we think about our future. If we think about enablement, information, knowledge, learning at work, we believe it's going to be more personalized in the future. We believe it's going to be more context relevant, and we believe it's going to meet you in your flow of work. And so as we think about the investments we make, how do they serve that long-term strategy while also balancing, that short-term, hey, if we have a large enterprise customer that's about to churn, we've learned the hard way that sometimes fulfilling that request will still lead to the churn and eat up a month of your roadmap. But then also, looking at that feature set and thinking about how does that further our mission and how does that benefit other customers? And so to echo what everyone said, it's much easier said than done, but I think really looking at your usage data, looking at your retention numbers, and making sure that you're not overemphasizing innovation and growth, because we've been there, we've done that. And while it's exciting to be constantly announcing new things, it can be a very dangerous thing. And so, for example, we've always wanted to incorporate AI into the product. We probably could have started a year ago, but we knew that, hey, there are some certain foundational investments that we need to make in our platform to really be able to unlock that future. And so we waited up until recently to do that, because first we wanted to make sure that the fundamentals of our platform were going to ultimately scale and really be able to leverage that power before just slapping some of those features on to be able to say, like, look, we have AI now. And to me, those are the really difficult decisions that you have to make as a founder to stay relevant, but also, make sure that your long-term is protected.
Yeah, really well said. And I think anchoring on those core principles is a really good way to structure it, where you have all these different things, and like that may be the clarity amidst all of the chaos that can be these features. One follow-up there that I think a lot of folks may be grappling with is who actually owns those decisions inside the organization? Like, who owns that quarterly roadmap session? Who makes the final call there? I know it may vary org to org, but Melanie, maybe for you all specifically, I'd like to get your take.
I'd say I still own the final sign-off. That said, right now our head of product and engineering are really the ones, and really it's our head of product that's putting together that plan. But I'm also I love product. I love what we're building. And so I still review designs. Like, I care that much to be involved. And so I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's my answer.
No, that's great. And as a founder very early on, like, this product is your baby. So it makes sense to have a
Neil, I'll add,
yeah.
Like Melanie, we're proud of our product. My co-founder and I made a decision at the beginning of the year that we would relinquish the decisions to our head of product. That's what we hired him for, his expertise. And we just as founders, started making decisions on where to back out and let your department heads or the people that you brought on own some of the more important strategic decisions and trust.
I like that too. Yeah.
But
And
I'm with you, Melanie. I love my baby.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
Yeah. And there probably is a time and place for both. Like maybe for some decisions you can really delegate there, but if it's a company bet, maybe the founder should be making that. So there's maybe a bunch of different nuances there. But back to the go-to-market side, it'd be great to explore as a team what pushbacks we commonly see. As we may know, sellers perhaps are a bit of a different breed when it comes to actually buying software. So love to get perspectives on challenges in selling to this cohort and learnings as we've been in the market and successfully sold to this group. On a personal note for us at Novatiq, I think one thing that we've heard from some sales leaders is that their biggest fear is that this is shelfware. This is another tool that our sellers have. It's not actually used. And but like worse yet, it's going to be challenging for sellers to actually get access to and continually utilize. So one thing that we found to be very helpful is when we're running pilots and getting people in there, tracking weekly engagement as the main KPI. We've seen that even if the value is there, even if it's like a very, very clear sell, unless sellers are actually using it, the VPs and powers that be will not sign off on it. So we've tried to build that into our trial and pilot process there. But I'm sure there's other tips that the panel has. So Christian, over to you. Would love to understand how you have approached some of these challenges and what they may be for your business.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said, Neil. Like it's ultimately, we bought so many tools over the last few years. Like it was the wild, wild west of tool purchasing. And now we've seen that so much wasn't used or wasn't adequately used. And someone said, like previously it was FOMO and now it's FOMO. So previously it's fear of missing out and now it's fear of messing up. Like I don't want to buy something as like the head of RevOps or the head of sales that is then not used. And so that's why the conversation, and I think that's why I already mentioned this right at the beginning, is all about like, okay, how could I potentially solve this with the tools I already have right now? And more than anything right now, it's all about consolidation. So it's like, nobody has budget anymore. I have way too many tools already. So instead of buying a new tool, how can I actually like solve this like with the tools that I already have? And I think that's the challenges pretty much everyone is facing in this market specifically. And that's why, but notwithstanding, I still love where we're selling to. Like we're selling to sellers. It's a ginormous market. Everyone needs sales tools. So this is actually a really good thing. But on the other hand, there's also a whole lot of competition in there. So what worked really well for us is really finding our niche, like figuring out, here's what we do. Very, very easy explained. So in our case, we track your champions for job changes. You have other tools for, let's say, prospecting, for cold outbounding. We have a very specific use case. We solve this better than anyone else. And solving this better than others means more revenue for you. So I think really, really simple messaging, very straightforward, making sure we actually get access in a very, very crowded market. And I think that worked for us. So basically, instead of feature dumping and trying to convince them with more and more features, what is the number one thing they can benefit? And ultimately, what is the bottom line that they get from this? How can you really prove that out?
Yeah. And I like that point too around calling out why this is the tool, like above the things you could use to accomplish this today. Like, hey, we built this tool for the 3 years, 5 years in the market for this use case. Like we're the partner that's going to solve this the best. I really like that framing of it. Melanie, how do you guys approach this on the Speckit side?
To echo what you said, Christian, I think the biggest challenge right now is just go-to-market stack consolidation. I think that's been our challenge too. There's a lot of different ways you can solve the rep enablement knowledge challenge, whether it's knowledge management or LMS or CMS. And so, Christian, to your point, it's finding like what is that specific use case where we are uniquely a better fit and can help you drive more revenue and make your reps more efficient. But, I'd say that this is an ongoing challenge for us. And so, we've been in the market the last few years of helping teams create new budget. And we've taken a step back this year and really think like, is this the right market to be doing that in? Right? Like it's already such an uphill battle to sell in this market to begin with. How can we go after existing budget and what needs to be true about our product in order to do that? And so I'd say the go-to-market consolidation, and I think we're just at the start of it. I think if you look at, the level of consolidation happening across, kind of the revenue intelligence tech stack, right? The Claries and Outreach, like there's competition. There's so much competition there. Then you look at kind of the CMS enablement platform. Conversation intelligence is now showing up in both places. Deal rooms are in like every product in the space. Like, I think anyone selling to revenue teams is going to be facing this challenge for the next 5 years. Even in a better market, the same challenge is going to exist. And so I think continuing to get really clear on where you play and figuring out what is that platform play long term is going to be key. And one last point too, like being another destination for the rep, I think right now is going to be really difficult. Really, really difficult. Like our whole goal is to be that omnipresent, like, hey, wherever you are, you have the answer you need. But I think tools that are another place that a user needs to log in and go to is going to be a real challenge. And so how do you bring that into the rep's workflow so that you can mitigate the context switching and clicking that needs to happen from a pure technology standpoint?
Yeah. Really meeting users where they are is so critical. I think we've all seen that play out today, and I think that's a very salient point. Matt, over to you. How do you guys approach this at Reggie? I think it may be similar in the sense of consolidation approaching the market.
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of what Melanie's saying, so I'm going to try to say something she didn't. I'll start by saying this. Like, number one, like reps aren't winning today. Reps haven't been winning for a long time. And, we quickly talk about tool saturation. We don't talk about that we haven't found the unlock to get most of our reps winning. And reps want to go faster and be better. And the managers want them to do more and achieve more. So there's clearly an opportunity to sell into this market because even though there's a lot out there, the job's not done. And I think that's what we have to hang our hat on, that despite the objections and despite the struggles and despite all the stack and the consolidation and even some of the muddiness that Melanie pointed out in some of the different categories, the truth is, like, reps aren't winning consistently, they're not winning enough, and the job's not done. And we're all here because we believe that we've brought product to life that can help accelerate the job getting done. And, points that I want to call out that are mandatory, like one, you got to meet the rep where they're at, no question about that. And you've got to do it in a spectacular way. Like, pain's not enough. Every team is in some level of pain. Not all pain gets solved. And it's a huge distinction. One of the things that we're doing in our sales process, like, we qualify out, we don't qualify in, because we'll spend a lot of time. Like, are you actively trying to solve this pain? And we actually love to hear that they are. Like, most teams would feel threatened that they're looking at competitors or people that offer something. And we love that because it actually validates that they're taking action against the problem. Most teams aren't. Most teams won't and can't right now. So the ability to find teams that are actually taking action to solving that's the best thing that we can see. And then we do a great job because the goalposts have changed this year for all of us. What it took to win business last year is not what it takes to win business this year. So we're doing more POVs, we're providing more value, we have definitive ROI cases. So, the world's changed, but I would say, like, despite all the struggles, which are real, it's also real that there's a lot of opportunity. That's why we're here. Other founders are here. It's why new products, new ideas continue to be thought of and brought to market because the job's not done.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Matt. Qualify out, not in, I think is a really well said remark there. And it's really speaking to what I think a lot of reps don't want to do, where they want to believe that people will advance to the next stage. They want to believe that, like, they're actually really qualified in doing deep market research. In reality, like, looking at those actual signals, I think is such a great call out. Joyce, we'd love to round out this discussion around things that you've noticed that have been helpful when selling to go-to-market and sales teams.
The other panelists have already said so many great tips and points. I agree with all of them. Not too much to add other than to say, game knows game. And one of the things I always have to emphasize to our sales team is that because we are selling to other sellers, we really have to bring our A game. But it's also not just about the usual, like, ask the right prospecting questions, like, get the commitment on the call for the next demo, et cetera, et cetera. It's more, how can we be thought leaders? How can we stand out? Because in a world in which, I mean, I've been pitched by, I myself, I suppose, as a potential buyer of many products, have also been pitched by so many companies offering things that seem similar. We all know it's hard, it's crowded. The barriers to entry of becoming a founder, of building products, has become lower than ever before. And so I do think GTM is even more important, and being a thought leader and seeing as an expert, giving rather than asking to receive from the very beginning, and kind of building up that credibility and building up the relationships might be one of the only ways right now to stand out. Because again, when everything feels like a commodity and everything feels just like, oh man, I've seen this demo 3 times already this week, what kind of starts to stand out are those human relationships. And that's why we really emphasize so much just the salesmanship of it all. And that comes down to people, that comes down to that like B2B motion that is obviously not for everyone, but at least for us and for many of the clients we work with is so imperative.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point in the sense that, like, amidst all this consolidation that we're seeing in the market, like, the relationship is what persists. That if you have customers that are happy, that continually talk with you, they're not really going to look at other options, and they'll keep on renewing. So I think that's a really good point there, Joyce. Well, looking at the time, we may have to wrap in the next few minutes. So let's look around the panel and take a quick moment to reflect on what we've talked about today. Any parting takeaways that we'd share for those that are listening in today. I'll go ahead and start with one on my end, where I think what we've seen so far is that it can be really tricky to sell to salespeople. There's challenges in the market left and right, but I think the one guiding theme and through line that we've seen at Nabatic is that for all these questions that we have that seem really hard to answer, talking to customers solves basically all of them. Like, if you talk to them and say, like, hey, why aren't you using this tool? They will tell you why they aren't using it, that indeed it's not another tool to access, like you're talking about, Melanie, like in the workflow is so much better. So they will literally give you the advice that you need to take your business to the next level and really solve those pain points. So I think, at least for us, like, that's been a really helpful thing that people always say to do, but in the moment, it's just really easy to make assumptions as a founder. And we've continually made the mistake of making those assumptions versus just actually going to the source and getting real tangible feedback. Joyce, what parting advice would you share with the panel here?
I guess parting advice is just, look at revealed preferences. Obviously, talk to customers, but also look at what they're actually putting money behind, what they're actually using. Sometimes it is better to create a totally new category. It's less crowded. There is a lot of education and a lot of cost you have to bear when it comes to go to market. But right now, when it seems as if there's just tighter budgets and more pressure on ROI, being able to do that long-term investment, whether it's investing in relationships, whether it's investing in creating a new category, it's definitely worth it. And best of luck to everyone. Being a founder, especially selling to sales professionals, is probably one of the most challenging and one of the most rewarding and exciting areas that you can be a founder in.
Awesome. All you, Christian.
Yeah, I need to just double down on what you said, Neil. Just basically don't make assumptions of whether people will or will not like your product or will use it or will pay for it, because you're certainly wrong with your assumptions. Like, no product survives the first touch with the prospect or the customer. So really go out there, get that feedback, and do it more often than you're comfortable with, just to get the real feedback. And then the other thing I want to say is, Joyce, I actually love our space. I actually love selling to salespeople. I think it's so much easier than to selling to anyone else. Like, I think everyone else is so much harder to reach than salespeople. I think when you sell to sales, sometimes they give you feedback of like, okay, and the next step here should be that. So actually, I've seen people drive the conversation because they've seen it from the other side. But I think the important thing is it's a super crowded space. So it's more important than probably in any other space to be really clear on what you're doing for the customer and how it's different than others. So really fine tune, find that small niche, find, like we call UserGems a Trojan horse to get into this very, very crowded market.
Love it. I agree. The one piece on the talking to customers, I think talking to the reps, and that's the hardest piece, right? Because typically you're selling to enablement, RevOps, sales leaders, but figuring out like how do you actually get that end user feedback, I think has been some of the most insightful feedback that we've had in terms of the product usage. And ultimately, you know, I think in a crowded market where companies are looking to like ultimately cut back wherever they can, yes, proving ROI and impact and revenue and all those metrics, you know, that we all speak to, and productivity, et cetera, are important. But if the reps are like, I can't live without this tool, this is helping me in my day-to-day, and you've got enough people saying that at your customer, they ain't going to churn. So how do you make sure that you're the tool that the reps want to use every day and love? And the only way to really do that is making sure that you're speaking to the reps. So I'll leave it at that.
My takeaway would be if you can't transform a process or workflow, what you're working on might not be big enough today.
Very succinct, but very well done. You have a lot of opportunities to change an entire day-to-day for reps, but there's very few things that actually make a difference. So I think really well said, Matt, and a great way to cap off the panel. Wanted to thank all of our panelists for taking the time to join. Melanie from Speckit, Matt from Regi, Christian from UserGems, and Joyce from Alaris. So thank you guys so much for hopping on, and thank you all for joining and listening into this panel today. If you have any questions, I can speak on behalf of the speakers saying that we're all happy to connect, share more about our products, learnings along the way. So don't hesitate to reach out. And thanks again for hopping in. Bye.
Cheers.
Neil, appreciate it. Talk soon. Bye.